The story of the samurai begins long before their armor gleamed beneath lantern light, back in an age when Japan's rulers lived far from the rugged lands they claimed to govern. Imagine drifting through that early landscape, where dense forests covered the mountains and distant provinces waited patiently for someone to truly understand them. As you settle in, you might wonder how a quiet archipelago, shaped by storms and old traditions, produced a warrior class unlike any other. The answer doesn't arrive all at once. It unfolds slowly, like the sound of a distant stream becoming clearer as you walk toward it. When the imperial court moved to its new home, the leaders embraced ceremony and elegance, welcoming poetry and ritual into their days. Yet beauty often arrives paired with vulnerability. While the court perfected the gentle details of refined life, the countryside began to change. Bandits roamed, rival families tightened their grip on fertile valleys, and distant counties needed firmer hands than those drifting through palace halls. The court's solution seemed simple at first: send reliable men to oversee faraway estates, collect taxes, and protect the people. But temporary assignments have a way of turning permanent, especially when those appointed discover how much control they can gather quietly year after year. The men sent to these provinces earned their strength not through the delicate arts of the capital but through riding, hunting, and defending land they began to treat as their own. They trained in harsh winters and scorching summers, mastering bows taller than themselves and learning to guide their horses across uneven terrain. As you picture those early riders, perhaps you can feel the first threads of something new forming. They weren't yet samurai, as we imagine them, but the roots were growing inch by inch. Up north, on the edge of settled Japan, these warriors faced opponents who had resisted imperial rule for generations. The people who lived in those cold, sweeping plains fought with skill and fierce independence, challenging the newcomers in sudden ambushes and silent raids. These encounters reshaped the warriors' thinking. Tradition mattered less than survival, and survival depended on quick judgment and steady hands. Each clash added experience, and each experience deepened a mindset built not on courtly ideals but on trust between fighters, the obedience of a loyal steed, and the calm required to release an arrow at the perfect moment. Have you ever noticed how some lessons can be taught gently, while others arrive like lightning? These came as lightning. Victories brought rewards, recognition, followers. Defeats brought scars and new determination. As seasons turned, families rose to prominence, carving their names into the story of the eastern provinces. They built wooden strongholds atop hills shaped by time, with watchtowers that gazed far across valleys where rice fields shimmered with morning mist. These places were not quiet refuges but centers of power, where strategy, alliances, and daily discipline were etched into the rhythm of life. Two families in particular began to shine more brightly than the rest. Each claimed noble ancestry, tracing their origins to emperors of long ago. Whether every detail of those claims was true mattered less than the belief they inspired. People longed for leaders touched by destiny, and these families were ready to answer that longing. One commanded influence through land networks, relationships with local leaders, and patience. The other wielded the sea as its ally, controlling trade routes where ships glided between islands, carrying wealth that strengthened their influence at court. Their warriors perfected the craft of mounted archery, their bows curved elegantly, their arrows crafted for every situation. Some built to pierce armor, some to cut through unprotected flesh, and some designed to burn. Their armor became a balance between protection and mobility, lacquered against the rain and tied together with cords in intricate patterns. As you imagine these soldiers adjusting their helmets before riding into the morning light, you might sense how their identity was solidifying piece by piece. Sword-making evolved alongside them. Blades shifted from straight and practical to curved and resilient, shaped by fire and water in ways that required deep patience. These early swords were not yet the masterpieces we think of today, but they carried the promise of what was to come. Every fold in the metal held a story. Every edge reflected a journey. Perhaps you felt something similar before, the sense that you're becoming something greater, even if you're still far from your final form. Warfare changed as well. Warriors still valued individual skill, but they learned to move in harmony, each trusting the other's timing. battles could shift from long-range exchanges of arrows to sudden charges in the blink of an eye. On horseback, the wind became their companion. On foot, determination anchored their every step. They honed their bodies through endless practice, trained their minds to remain still under pressure, and absorbed teachings from the temples that dotted the landscape. Meditation became as essential as the sharpening of a blade. With each passing year, the court relied more heavily on these fighters. Yet reliance brings tension. The more the warriors grew in power, the less the nobles could command them. And soon, rivalries that once simmered quietly broke into open flame. The tension that slowly gathered between those powerful families eventually grew too large to ignore. What began as whispers in distant provinces turned into firm stances, sharpened glances, and choices that could no longer be undone. Step by step, the land drifted toward a conflict that seemed almost inevitable. When two rising forces occupy the same horizon, how long can they avoid colliding? And when they finally do, what shape will the world take afterward? Rival messengers moved between the capital and the provinces, carrying letters heavy with accusation and caution. Each family insisted it acted only to preserve order, yet every action, no matter how small, felt like a stone added to a scale already close to tipping. Warriors who once trained quietly now found themselves called into service, polishing their armor while wondering how soon they would face former allies on the battlefield. It must have felt surreal, standing on familiar soil, preparing for a storm everyone sensed but no one could fully describe. The first clashes ignited quickly and unpredictably. Skirmishes erupted near river crossings where water drifted peacefully past, unaware of the arrows arcing overhead. Riders galloped through forests they once hunted in, now alert for ambush rather than game. Even the breeze seemed to carry hints of unrest. Have you ever noticed how a place can feel different just before something significant happens, even if nothing visible has changed? The warriors felt that too, long before the larger battles began. When the major confrontation finally arrived, it wasn't a single explosive moment but a series of drawn-out struggles, each shaping the next. The land became a board where strategy mattered as much as courage. One family relied on disciplined formations and long-term planning. The other trusted in adaptability and the sea routes that supported them. Yet even the best plans can shift when wind, weather, and fate intervene. Some days ended with surprising victories, while others brought sudden losses that echoed across the provinces. Yet amid these battles, a quiet transformation occurred. Warriors who had once fought mainly for local matters now discovered they were participating in something far larger. Their movements influenced the lives of thousands. Their decisions carried consequences beyond their own borders. The sense of belonging to a greater cause began to shape them, binding them not just to their lords but to a growing warrior culture that valued discipline, loyalty, and a clarity of purpose that helped guide them through uncertainty. For some, this clarity became a source of comfort. For others, it became a heavy weight they struggled quietly to carry. One of the most striking features of these conflicts was the way they combined brutal reality with an almost ceremonial rhythm. Before major engagements, riders sometimes exchanged messages or challenges, establishing intentions in a way that blended tradition with practicality. At the same time, weather, terrain, and timing often rendered plans fragile. A morning fog could conceal entire squadrons. A sudden downpour could turn solid ground into mud that trapped horses and slowed formations. Nature became a silent participant in the struggle, influencing its direction with no concern for human ambition. As the fighting intensified, stories spread of single warriors whose actions changed the course of a day, archers whose arrows found their marks from impossibly long distances, swordsmen who managed to hold narrow passes alone until reinforcements arrived, messengers who rode for hours without rest to deliver critical information. These tales grew in the telling, of course, but the core remained true. Individuals mattered deeply. Even within the growing scale of battle, one person's courage or cleverness could reshape an outcome. Isn't it remarkable how history often hinges on moments so small they nearly go unnoticed? Gradually, one family gained the upper hand. Their discipline, alliances, and strategic patience began to outweigh the bold and fluid tactics of their rivals. Fortresses that once seemed impenetrable fell after long sieges. Key provinces shifted allegiance. And in time, the balance of power leaned decisively in one direction. With this shift came a sense of inevitable change, like watching a tide rise slowly, then all at once realizing the shore has transformed. But power is never a single, unmoving point. Once one family ascended, new challenges emerged from unexpected corners. Victories brought prestige, but they also created rivals within their own ranks. Loyal followers expected rewards. Ambitious subordinates eyed opportunities. The complexities of leadership stretched beyond the battlefield and into every aspect of governance. Maintaining unity required as much skill as winning a war. And when unity faltered, the consequences rippled outward in ways that shaped the next generation. Meanwhile, warriors living through these transitions continued refining their identity. Their training became more formalized, their equipment more advanced, their expectations more clearly defined. They developed codes of behavior that blended practicality with idealism. These principles weren't written in a single moment but evolved gradually, shaped by experience, reflection, and the teachings of elders who had seen too much not to understand the value of restraint. A warrior's strength was measured not only by skill, but by the steadiness of the heart guiding the blade. Temples played a growing role in this evolution. Monks taught mindfulness, discipline, and philosophies that helped warriors navigate fear and uncertainty. Meditation allowed them to enter battle with calm awareness rather than frantic energy. The idea of facing death with acceptance, not seeking it recklessly but not fearing it excessively, began to take root. This mindset didn't eliminate fear. It simply placed fear in a space where it could be acknowledged without taking control. It's interesting, isn't it, how clarity often arises during the most chaotic moments. While warriors internalized these teachings, the political world continued its shifts. The victorious family established a new government that balanced the role of the emperor with the practical authority of military leadership. This arrangement created a unique structure where symbolic power and practical power coexisted, sometimes harmoniously, sometimes uneasily. But for the moment, it brought stability that many welcomed after years of conflict. Stability, however, does not mean stillness. Over time, other clans rose in influence, inspired or threatened by the new order. Some strengthened their ties to the capital. Others focused on dominating specific regions. All understood that the landscape of authority was fluid, and that opportunities could appear suddenly for those prepared to seize them. Beneath the surface calm, the potential for upheaval slowly gathered once more. And within this environment of shifting alliances, the warrior class continued to refine what it meant to live with honor, loyalty, and disciplined purpose. Their stories spread across the provinces, shaping young minds who dreamed of mastering horse and bow, sword and spirit. They admired the legends of the recent past while also learning from the quieter figures who emphasized reflection, patience, and the power of restraint. Each generation layered its own experiences atop the last, creating a living tradition that deepened with time. As the years moved forward, the seeds planted by past conflicts began to sprout into new ambitions, new rivalries, and new paths that would guide the warrior class into a dramatically different era. The calm after the storm was only temporary, and soon the land would once again feel the restless stirring of change that would bring both opportunity and hardship in ways no one could yet predict. The calm that followed those early struggles carried a fragile quality, like mist that clings to fields before the sun lifts it away. People hoped the peace would last, yet deep within the provinces, ambitions were already stirring. Clans that once lay dormant began to strengthen their fortifications. Young heirs trained with sharpened focus, aware that the balance of power in the land could tilt again at any moment. It's curious how quiet periods often conceal the beginnings of profound change, isn't it? The warrior families continued shaping their identities, polishing virtues that blended martial skill with moral discipline. But as they refined themselves, the world around them shifted in ways no one fully expected. Trade routes expanded. New technologies arrived. And slowly, the importance of land ownership transformed. Provinces became not just places to govern but assets to defend fiercely. Each district's fields, rivers, and roads carried long-term significance, sometimes more than the distant court realized. Within this growing complexity, certain clans distinguished themselves through relentless discipline. They emphasized loyalty to their leaders, the memory of their ancestors, and a sense of responsibility that rested heavily on their shoulders. When conflicts arose, whether small disputes or larger uprisings, they acted with decisive clarity. Their warriors knew that hesitation could cost lives, and their leaders understood that a single misstep could unravel years of progress. These pressures molded them, smoothing some edges while sharpening others. But other clans took a different path. They embraced adaptability, shifting alliances whenever necessary and finding advantage in unpredictability. Their skill lay in reading the political winds, understanding when to retreat gracefully and when to strike with conviction. They treated diplomacy and subtle negotiation as weapons equal to the bow and sword. And while some criticized them as opportunistic, others quietly admired their ability to survive every change the era delivered. The contrast between these approaches created an undercurrent of tension that grew steadily. As clans competed for influence over major cities and important provinces, old rivalries resurfaced with new intensity. Some families forged alliances through marriages, binding distant domains together. Others chose isolation, believing that self-reliance provided the clearest path forward. And beneath these political maneuvers, warriors continued their training in dusty courtyards, unaware of how close their lives were to being reshaped once again. One of the most significant transformations of this era involved the shifting relationship between warriors and the distant imperial court. The court still held ceremonial authority, yet the practical control of the nation increasingly fell into the hands of those who wielded military power. This gradual separation between symbolic and functional leadership created a subtle friction, one that grew harder to ignore as clans gained confidence. Have you ever noticed how a structure can look solid from afar yet reveal tiny cracks upon closer inspection? The government of this time was much like that. As unrest simmered, new figures emerged from the shadows of provincial life, commanders who possessed not just skill but vision. They understood the old ways yet saw beyond them, recognizing that the land required a different kind of leadership. Under their command, warriors learned new tactics, employing formations that prioritized cooperation and timing over individual brilliance. These leaders valued unity deeply, knowing that a divided force, no matter how talented, would falter before a coordinated enemy. Such leaders often embodied a calm determination that inspired loyalty. They spoke little but acted decisively, earning respect through consistent fairness rather than dramatic gestures. Their presence created stability within their domains, even as instability grew elsewhere. And when the time came for difficult choices, they approached them without hesitation, grounded by a quiet certainty shaped from years of reflection. But while certain regions thrived under these steady hands, others faced growing disorder. Bandit groups expanded into small armies. Local officials struggled to maintain authority as resources dwindled. Farmers who once lived peacefully now worried about raids that could strike without warning. In these troubled areas, warriors found themselves not only fighting external forces but also restoring order within their own communities. Their duties expanded far beyond traditional battle. They became protectors of travel routes, mediators in disputes, and guardians of vulnerable households. Amid this increasing complexity, a powerful clan began rising from relative obscurity. Though not originally counted among the great families, their discipline, internal unity, and strategic brilliance allowed them to grow steadily stronger. They forged alliances with precision, gathering followers who admired their clarity of purpose. And while their rivals underestimated them at first, it soon became clear that this clan possessed an extraordinary capacity for long-term planning. Step by step, they expanded their influence, quietly, methodically, and with a patience that unsettled others. As their power grew, the political landscape shifted once again. Some families aligned with them, sensing an opportunity to secure their own futures. Others resisted fiercely, hoping to prevent another dramatic reordering of authority. Skirmishes returned, at first small and scattered, then gradually larger. Provinces that had known peace for years suddenly found themselves preparing defensive walls, storing rice, and reinforcing gates. The scent of change drifted through the air like smoke from a distant fire. Warriors who had grown up listening to stories of earlier conflicts now found themselves living through new ones. They rode along familiar roads with unfamiliar tension, wondering whether the next bend would reveal friend or foe. Their training guided them, but nothing can fully prepare a person for the moment when peaceful routines dissolve into the uncertainty of battle. Yet they faced these challenges with a steady resolve shaped by generations of tradition. The conflicts that erupted were different from those of the past. They were broader, more strategic, and deeply interconnected. No longer were battles isolated events. Each engagement influenced alliances, resource distribution, and the morale of entire regions. Leaders had to consider not only the immediate fight but the long chain of consequences that would follow. And as these new wars unfolded, patterns began emerging. Patterns that pointed toward a future where the warrior class would hold unprecedented authority. Even as the struggle intensified, the philosophical foundation of the warrior culture continued evolving. Teachings emphasized balance between decisiveness and compassion, urging warriors to act with clarity yet refrain from unnecessary cruelty. They were expected to protect, not simply conquer. This expectation, though noble, was not always easy to uphold in the chaos of shifting loyalties and unpredictable battles. Still, many strove to embody these ideals, believing that the true strength of a warrior lay not only in the arm but in the spirit guiding it. As the rising clan tightened its grasp on the nation, it became increasingly clear that a major turning point approached. The paths of countless leaders, warriors, monks, farmers, and ordinary citizens converged toward a moment that would reshape the entire country. A question lingered in the minds of many. Would this new order bring lasting stability, or would it merely set the stage for the next great upheaval? The answer, like so much in this era, would unfold gradually, marked by victories and losses, promises and betrayals, ambitions and sacrifices. For now, the land moved forward with steady, deliberate momentum, carrying its people toward a future they could sense but not yet understand. As the rising clan extended its influence, the country felt as though it stood on the edge of a long, deep breath. Every watchtower, every river crossing, every mountain path carried the weight of expectation. People spoke softly in tea houses, wondering whether this emerging order would secure the peace or shatter it once more. Even warriors, trained to face uncertainty without hesitation, sensed that the choices made in these years would echo far into the future. Isn't it strange how entire eras can hinge on decisions made by a handful of people who may not fully understand the consequences of their own ambition? The new leaders acted with deliberate calm. They studied past conflicts carefully, noting not only the victories but the mistakes that had allowed earlier powers to crumble. They sought unity but understood that unity required more than battlefield triumphs. It demanded fairness, structure, and a vision that extended beyond their own generation. And slowly, they began weaving these ideas into the fabric of governance. They strengthened laws, established clearer lines of authority, and required that even high-ranking warriors remain accountable. Such measures seemed rigid to some, but to others they brought a sense of steadiness the land had long lacked. Still, resistance simmered in pockets across the provinces. Not everyone welcomed the changes. Some clans refused to release the independence they had held for decades. Others mistrusted the centralizing power, fearing it would eventually swallow their traditions. Skirmishes broke out, small at first, like sparks landing on dry straw. But sparks, when fanned by wind or anger, can easily grow into uncontrollable flames. The rising clan responded quickly, sending experienced commanders to settle unrest before it spread too widely. These commanders acted with patience, attempting negotiation when possible and force only when necessary. But even restrained action can bring unintended repercussions, and each victory carried the shadow of new tensions forming elsewhere. It was an endless dance between order and rebellion, progress and resistance, vision and fear. Amid this turmoil, the warrior class evolved yet again. Many found themselves not just fighting but administering villages, supervising harvests, overseeing roadwork, and mediating disputes between farmers. Their responsibilities expanded far beyond the battlefield. They became the threads connecting daily life to broader political shifts. And through this expanded role, they developed a deeper understanding of the people they protected, their struggles, their hopes, their quiet perseverance. This connection changed the way many warriors viewed their duties. They no longer saw themselves solely as instruments of war but as guardians of stability. Their loyalty broadened, stretching beyond individual lords toward the well-being of entire communities. And as their worldview widened, so did their sense of purpose. Have you noticed how certain roles grow more meaningful when tied to something larger than oneself? The warriors of this era experienced exactly that. Meanwhile, the new leadership turned its attention toward economic growth. Roads improved. Trade increased. Markets swelled with goods from distant regions. Even artistic culture blossomed, as poets, painters, and performers found patrons eager to promote beauty alongside order. The nation, after so many cycles of unrest, seemed to settle into a rhythm that blended discipline with creativity. People could breathe more deeply, sleep more peacefully, and plan for futures that once felt too uncertain to imagine. Of course, even in times of relative security, challenges persisted. Natural disasters struck unexpectedly, storms, fires, earthquakes, reminding everyone that human ambition could never fully tame the forces of nature. When these calamities occurred, warriors often became first responders, coordinating rescues and organizing relief. Their readiness, forged on the battlefield, proved invaluable in moments when the land itself seemed to rebel. Through all these fluctuations, the warrior code matured. It placed emphasis not only on courage and loyalty but on humility, empathy, and the calm dignity required to act wisely under pressure. Teachers in remote temples guided young warriors through meditation practices, helping them cultivate stillness during chaotic times. Elders shared stories of past generations, reminding listeners that true strength lay not in dominance but in clarity, restraint, and responsibility. These teachings, passed from mentor to student, gradually solidified into the principles that would define the warrior class for centuries. The nation's structure also solidified under the new regime. Authority flowed downward through a carefully designed chain, ensuring that even distant provinces remained connected to central leadership. While some missed the freedom of the earlier era, many welcomed the newfound predictability. Families could work their fields without fearing sudden battles. Merchants could travel more safely across regions. Children grew up in a world where the sound of galloping horses did not always signal danger. It was not a perfect peace, but it was a peace that allowed life to flourish. As this stability deepened, the identity of the warrior class crystallized. They no longer defined themselves primarily through combat but through discipline, service, and moral clarity. Their armor, once crafted purely for war, became symbolic. Their swords, treasured as extensions of their spirit, represented not aggression but integrity. They carried themselves with a quiet awareness that every action, every word, every decision, reflected the values they claimed to uphold. Over time, the landscape changed in ways no one could have predicted. Foreign ships appeared on distant shores, carrying new languages, new tools, and new ideas. Some viewed these arrivals with curiosity, others with suspicion. Leaders debated whether to embrace or resist such influence. This period of uncertainty challenged long-held traditions, requiring wisdom rather than impulse. And once again, warriors played a crucial role, observing, adapting, and guiding their communities through unfamiliar territory. Yet even as the world expanded around them, the core of the warrior spirit remained intact. Their calm determination, their sense of duty, their commitment to honor, these qualities endured through every transformation. Generations rose and fell, each adding layers to the legacy left behind by those early riders who once patrolled rugged frontier lands. And while the shape of their role shifted, the essence carried forward like an unbroken thread woven through time. Eventually, the era of armored warriors on horseback faded, replaced by new forms of governance and technology. But the spirit they cultivated, the blend of discipline, compassion, and thoughtful action, continued influencing culture long after the clatter of swords and armor fell silent. Their presence became less visible but more deeply rooted, carried quietly in the values, stories, and memories of the nation they had shaped so profoundly. As we drift toward rest, imagine those centuries unfolding like waves, each one rising, flowing, and then settling softly into the next. Picture the countless individuals whose lives contributed to the long arc of this story, each step building toward a legacy that still echoes today. And perhaps, in the calm that follows, one truth becomes clear: the strongest warriors are those who master themselves before mastering the world. Thank you for listening to this journey. If you'd like more calming histories and soothing storytelling, feel free to drift back here anytime. And if you enjoyed this story, Sleepy Owl will always be here to guide you through many more peaceful nights.